2. Highness, I am Samir, servant of Akbar. Peshawar, Northwest Frontier, Pakistan, June 13th to 17th. Prince Jamal, staying at the luxurious Peshawar Intercontinental Hotel, went out daily to see the refugees in their camps a dozen miles away. He was not well prepared for the horror of it. 3.5 million people, mostly women and children, the survivors of relentless bombing raids whose purpose was to drive them into destitution, make their land barren, and deny refuge, food, and cover to the patriots who still fought in the mountains. He saw people without eyes, with shattered limbs, lacking medical help, and sometimes even food. But he also saw a proud people who, when he stood in the back of his Land Rover throwing them $100 bills, cried, "Prince of Arabia, give us guns!" And as he watched, astonished, while the ragged multitude ignored the money and still called for guns, the reporters and photographers, some from highly reputable news media already earning huge salaries, fought each other for the fluttering notes. Are we all mad, he thought. Were we born for this? Is the whole world insane? Jamal sat down on the hard bench in the back of the open-top Land Rover, neat packets of banknotes beside him, the shouts of the people ringing in his ears. A towering Pashtun, who had walked for 12 days through the mountains from the northern battlefields of Afghanistan, fought off the armed police and jumped onto the vehicle. There was practically no flesh on his bones, and he was dressed in rags. His eyes burned red as he sat down beside the prince. The policeman sitting opposite Jamal struck out at the newcomer with a lathi, a brass-bound stave. The hillman seized it, broke it in two, and gave the Pakistani 3 strokes over the shoulders. The little sergeant screamed with pain and rage and drew his gun. "Stop that," said Jamal, and the policeman subsided into a sullen heap. The Land Rover continued its slow progression as the Pashtun spoke. "Son of a king, your ancestors and ours fought side by side on the battlefield and they won their wars. Today, people who call themselves our leaders sit on silken cushions and beg from you, who skulk in your marble palaces, afraid to fight. We, the fighters, go without. Son of an Arab, the weak, the women, the children are tortured and dying because of your neglect. God will requite you. Show me your palm." Jamal, without knowing why, held out his hand. The Pashtun looked at it as if reading the lines. "O prince, whose ancestors were eaters of desert locusts and became noblemen, you will become dirt. What a beautiful, what a soft hand, O prince! How sad to realize that one day, perhaps soon, it will burn in hell." Jamal shuddered. The man was right. The Arabs were full of talk and sometimes handed out money, but often to the wrong people, and usually because they did not want to be thought stingy. The Kuwait and Saudi clinics serving the camps were good, but small. The Pashtun was talking again. "Prince of the Arabs, you have thousands of young emirs, princes, and wonderful weapons, the best. We are fighting with our bare hands in the freezing mountains and scorching deserts. We are starving while you are overfed. We sleep on rocks and you doze in satin. If one, only one of your princes were to come to us to fight side by side, it would say more to the world and to our people than 1,000 of your majestic visits. Don't put it out of your mind, noble Arab." Jamal's orders from his father, the king, were to see and to be seen, while his entourage collected the information which the old man needed. The refugee question was not secondary exactly. After all, he had brought money to hand out, and to give the people at least some hope. There was little that an individual could do. Surely it was mainly a political problem. Surely one should not get too involved with distress which one could not remove. The United Nations Refugee High Commission was swamped by the problem. So was Pakistan. So were the International Red Cross and other agencies. Dr. Brutin, the IRC surgeon, was at full stretch, doing 7 amputations a day. At another camp, Prince Jamal raised his camera to take a picture of a group of children when they screamed in terror and ran away, falling over in their panic. The camp commandant touched his arm gently. "We forgot to tell you, Highness, that the last time anything was pointed at those children, it was a gun, and bullets followed, killing their parents. Look at their eyes, Prince." Jamal could stand it no more. Not for today, anyway. He went back to his hotel suite and lay on the bed, listening to the racing of his heart. Then he heard another sound, a tapping. A ragged figure had climbed onto the ledge outside his window and was trying to gain his attention. His first thought was to call the guard and have the man arrested, but Rind had already hissed in Arabic through the half-open sash, "Prince, I am from your father's friend. I am Samir from Afghanistan, from Sirdar Akbar. Let me in." He spoke with the intonation of the Gulf. Jamal opened the window wide. Once inside, Rind bowed and touched his head, eyes, and heart. "Homage, Highness," he said. The Arabs might, privately, call him a Jami, one of the dumb, in spite of his knowledge of Arabic, but Rind had no doubt that he could outthink this locust-eater, and was convinced that he would pull off his deception. Now for the next phase, a bit of romantic chivalry, theatre. He seized Jamal's robe and hung onto it, saying at the same time the ancient desert phrase of one who seeks protection. "Dakalak, O Jamal, son of Zaid, lord of the Anasa tribe, I am in your house." "Enough, you have my protection." Jamal was half amused, half impressed by the old-fashioned approach. He had seen hoary-headed ancients do it to his father in Arabia, but generally only when they wanted a camel, or to be sent to Harley Street for the treatment of some imaginary disease. "Peace upon thee, Emir." "And upon thee peace. Come and sit here. Will you take some refreshment?" Jamal noticed that the man was staring at a very large bowl of fruit embedded in crushed ice, which had just been sent up. Jamal signed to him to help himself. Rind's clothes were clean but torn. On his head was a mountaineer's chitrali wool cap, and he badly needed a shave. Nurhan and Rind had worked hard at the details of the disguise. "Thank you. I am Samir Kandahari, and my chief is Sirdar Akbar Khan Sharifi. I was with him in your Hadika city when he was Afghan ambassador there. I have also kissed the hand of your father, the king." The Afghan said no more for a time. He was too busy demolishing the pile of fruit. "What help do you need? Perhaps some money. Life is bad, I know, in poor Afghanistan." The prince was speculating. A couple of $1,000 should set him up in some sort of business in a place like Pakistan, repairing bicycles or something. "And how is His Excellency the Ambassador?" "Money," the Afghan laughed. "We don't need money. We have more money than anyone else in the entire world." He threw back his head and roared with laughter, his eyes streaming, until Jamal was almost sure that the poor fellow was deranged. "You must have been through a great deal of trouble since the musibat, the calamity." "Your Highness, my master told me to show you these." The spy took from his waist a roll of cotton cloth, heavy with coins, and handed it to Jamal. The prince poured the gleaming pieces onto the table. "Mohors," he said. "They are hundreds of years old. You have many of these? If you want us to buy you arms, we can't do that. The international repercussions—" "Highness, let me explain. The ambassador is well. He is in Kandahar province. Now I beg you to listen with patience, though what I have to say is indeed amazing. We have found the huge gold hoard of Ahmad Shah." Rind paused to let this sink in. "Sirdar Akbar Khan calculates it's worth over $400 billion, all in gold coins. We want your father, the king, to buy them from us. We can send them via the Baluchistan coast by the old smuggling route to the Gulf in dhows. When you have received them and not before, all he wants is for you to pay us in dollars." Jamal leant forward in his chair as the meanings of the words became clear, wondering at the same time whether he could trust his own ears. Rind now spoke more slowly, partly to help the prince to catch up, but also to show that the innocent Samir had difficulty with complicated plans. "The money is to be placed in an account in that country, yes, Switzerland, in a bank account at the Credit Central. The Afghan freedom fighters will then be able to buy all the arms they need from the international arms men. The Afghans will then defeat the Russians, and our country will be free, and the threat from the Rus to your land will be removed." Jamal said nothing. His mind was still reeling. Rind looked at the bemused expression on the prince's face and continued. "Oh, Prince, can you not see that destiny has brought us together and kept the hoard safe until this hour, so that in one stroke all the evils will be banished? But the greatest speed is necessary if the arms are to get to us before the Russians wipe us out." Jamal said, "Jalib, interesting. But how would you get the money out of the bank without opening an account with a signature? How soon after we got the gold would we give you the money? How would you know that you could trust us?" Rind smiled. "It has all been explained to me so many times that I know it by heart, Highness. First, you open the account with a nominal sum, ensuring that money can be put into it by the use of a single word, Golden Bird. We can all remember it because it alludes to an ancient tale of great significance. Second, when we land the gold, when you have inspected the consignment, you will be in touch with your embassy in Switzerland by satellite link-up from the landing beach and signal them to deposit the dollars. Third, we will be checking through our own people the precise moment when the account is credited with the dollars by the use of the Golden Bird password." Jamal raised his hand to stem the torrent of detail. The man seemed to have everything worked out, but there was something else that had to be understood first. "Mr. Samir, you must remember that nothing could possibly be settled until I have told my father all this. And of course, we would have to test the gold." "We know that. As for testing the gold, take all you wish. Here are 50 of the coins. And when the magnetic pole, your father the king, has agreed, as we know he will, you can place an advertisement in a Pakistani newspaper. This one you have on your table will do well. Say simply, 'I love the Golden Bird,' and our representative will contact you, using that phrase Golden Bird for identification." Rind smiled and took the prince's hand. "Thank you for your hospitality, sir. I shall go now, with faith in God." "Would you like to leave by the stairs?" "Thank you. I am quite comfortable climbing down walls." The prince, taking a deep breath, wrote in his notebook the words Golden Bird, Ancient Tale, Sirdar Akbar Khan, Kandahar, the hoard of Ahmad Shah, worth over $400 billion. After that, there did not seem to be much to do other than to go to bed. Tomorrow he would tell his pilot to get the aircraft ready, after he'd checked on the tail of the Golden Bird. If the Afghans got their arms, Narabia might not be threatened after all. Next morning the prince called for his car and was driven along the Khyber road to the ancient part of Peshawar city, where veiled women and burly, swaggering frontiermen made way reluctantly for the Mercedes. Jamal believed in omens. It was time to find a storyteller. At the Jail Bridge, the crowds, minivans, donkeys and goats were too jam-packed for the car to move. Jamal left the driver there, stepping out into the smell of coriander, kebabs and sandalwood. A party of huge Pashtuns from the borderland, plodding along with saplings which they had cut for walking staves, saw his desert headdress and shouted, equivocally, Jamal thought, "Live until death, Prince of the Arabs!" A tiny, wizened rickshaw-man was tugging at his sleeve. He jumped onto the seat while a man got between the shafts. "Kisa Kwane," Jamal told him. They went into the Khyber Bazaar and down to the T-junction, where the man pointed south through a winding street. Jamal left the rickshaw-man gazing bemusedly at a $50 note, his share of the oil money of Arabia dreamt about by everyone. Nearly 1,500 rupees. In a few minutes Jamal was in the Kisa Kwane, the market of the storytellers. Did stories hold a clue not only to history or to human hopes, as some believed, but to the very meaning of life, as the sages said? First came the china stalls, then copper, then shawls. A man tugged at his sleeve and offered to show him the peepul, the bow tree descended from the one under which Buddha had taught. Though he had spent so much time in the West, the roots of his own ancestral culture were in the most ancient East. Prince Jamal began to feel like a part of the scene rather than a mere playboy visitor. There were no storytellers in the main bazaar. Jamal took a right turn. In the warren of streets, he scanned the name boards of the tiny shops. There seemed to be everything except storytellers to be found. Pharmacies with human skulls and stuffed lizards hung from the ceilings. A crippled man, even his head awry, sat among a billion beads, stringing numberless rosaries for telling the 99 beautiful names. He saw shoes, slippers, glass bottles, clay pots, butchers, basket weavers. And here were guaranteed Arabian perfumes, just as he had seen guaranteed Peshawar perfumes on sale in his own city in Arabia. Import and export was a funny thing. Then he saw it, took it in, passed, and turned back. The almost illegible, painted sign, in sensuously beautiful calligraphy, which said, Hassan Mirza, Dakisa Kazanachi, Prince Hassan, Treasurer of Stories. Jamal pushed aside the bead curtain and bent to step inside. A small man, perhaps 60 years old, finely boned, dressed in a blue double-breasted suit and wearing a trilby, his features not unlike those of a South Italian, with curly white hair and a small moustache, was moving very silently towards him. "Peace on thee. Art thou strong?" His smile was familiar, mannered, like those on the faces of the courtiers in the palace at Hadika city. Jamal's Pashtu wasn't up to much. He wondered whether the man spoke English, which he was very comfortable in. But it always paid to start with Arabic, he had found. People hardly ever knew it hereabouts, but it had prestige. And his father had told him that, in the East, it was always important to get the first blow in oneself. "And on you peace. Are there books of the narratives in your shop? May you live long, Lord. The Mirza looked at him and answered in English, I can read Arabic, of course, sir, but Persian is my mother tongue. I expect you know English language, though? He spoke it well, though it was certain from the cadence of his voice that he'd never been in an Anglo-Saxon country. Yes, I do, thank you. I'm from the Gulf, and I want some stories for my children. We have all the stories here. Those which are not in the books are in my head. I could even have them written down for you. You have come to the right place. Have some tea. He clapped his hands, and a small boy with a shaven head ran in carrying 2 glasses. As he was ushered to one of the 3 big, worn armchairs in the shop, Jamal saw that he was in a largish room, completely lined with shelves of books. Could all these be books of stories? They sat and smiled at one another for a minute or 2. Jamal said, Have you the story of the Golden Bird? I think it must be from the classics, or it may be an Afghan tale. The storyteller nodded. The Golden Bird, Zarin Parinda, is what the Afghans called the hoopoe with the crown of gold. He is the leader who takes the 30 birds to find their destiny, their leader, true reality. And have you got the book? Only in Persian. It is the Mantiq al-Ta'ir, Speech of the Bird, the famous classic by Attar. Some people call it the Parliament of the Birds. Is it a long story, and what are its chief points? It is quite long, but it can be summarized. I'll have it written for you in Arabic, in a fine naskh hand, and posted to you at home. It should arrive in a month or 2. Like a made-to-measure suit, Jamal thought. What a good idea. But he wanted the information at once. He said, Take this, and here is my card. Send me the book. But in the meantime, I would like to hear the story, if you would be so kind. The Mirza took the $100 notes and, without a glance at them, handed them to the boy hovering at his elbow. His suit was shiny and very threadbare, and he was certainly in reduced circumstances, but his behavior was patrician. To Jamal he said, To hear is to obey. I am the treasurer of tales, and I shall certainly tell you about the bird. This youth, however, is my own treasurer of funds, and he will know best what to do with the money. Forgive me, Sidi Mirza, I didn't notice your man standing there. These Persians had been practicing courtly manners for thousands of years, and they always liked to score off an Arab. But I am travelling, and although myself an emir, who does not like to handle money any more than you, I have to get things done. He felt quite petulant. The Mirza beamed. Your Highness, as a man of nobility, the tale of the Golden Bird is exactly right for you. I shall summarize it. He started without further ado. One day, the representatives of the birds of the world decided that, like all other forms of creation, they should have a king. They agreed to seek one, and they found the hoopoe, Hudhud with his golden crown, to lead them in the search. He knew the way, for he was in the service of their celestial monarch. They had many discussions, and they travelled through mountains and valleys, through happiness and perils, always, of course, led by the Golden Bird. They had many crises, and again the hoopoe had to correct them, raise their spirits, keep them moving forward. Finally they reached the curtain which concealed the throne of their king, and prostrated themselves in awe and fear. Then the veil parted, and the birds, as they looked up, saw that there in front of them was a huge mirror. Their king, they realized, was none other than the reflection of them all. Mirza fell silent and folded his hands. Jamal asked him, "Is this story a good omen?" "It speaks of man, of course, and of the fact that it is the unity of human souls which totals absolute divinity and truth, from which we are ordinarily separated." The hoopoe, representative of the great King Solomon the Wisest, himself a king wearing a golden crown, like the agal and kafia headdress of the king of Arabia, leading his people to their high destiny, his father's role. Jamal embraced the Mirza and stepped out of the shop into the dusty alleyways once more.